Hello guys, welcome back or welcome if you're new. It's Christian from Emotions in Wine. So today we do an interesting tasting. It's the same grape as usually we do, but from two different appellations neighboring, very famous as you may know. So I refer you to the video of the trip Croatia 25 where we visited these places and these wineries, and I decided to make this tasting to really compare the two appellations, also a bit different winemaking styles, but it's interesting to see. Plavasmali is the grape, which is the most prestigious red grape in Croatia and most relevant, and the two appellations are the two historical ones, so Dingač and Postup. So Dingač was granted in 1961 and Postup in 1967. Is the name of the locations. Is Cibilić Peninsula in South Dalmatia facing Korčula Island. Is a long peninsula, as you can see, and steep, rocky slope facing the sea. So there is the triple insolation. Why? Because historically Plavasmali is a complicated grape with troubles in ripening, usually uneven. So there with triple insolation, because you have the sun, the sea reflection, and also the rock retaining overnight, help the maturation. Of course, nowadays summers are warmer in particular, so there is the risk to have too much sugar, too much ripeness. In fact, modern winemaking helps a lot now because they harvest a bit earlier in many cases. They do shorter maceration, so less extraction, because the alcohol is always very high in these wines due to that very hot and very dry. Remember, their rain is very little. So they moved all or most a bit to modern style of winemaking to keep more elegance and less structure, because the grape is powerful anyway, has need of long aging usually, and is rich in color, alcoholic, especially there, but in general, but in this area, easily going to 16. So the modern winemaking helps. And we will see also the difference between the two. But first, the difference between Dingač and Postup. So they are on the same peninsula, not far from each other. But there are several differences. First, the slope is much steeper in Dingač, in the southern part of the peninsula, while Postup is closer to Orebić, the main village, and not far from Korčula Island. So up to 70% in Dingač, as you can see. All the areas basically are steeper, even close to the sea. There is no beach at all, or rocky, very little topsoil, mostly pebbles, and a bit of terra rossa, usually top red soil. Bush alberello for both. Only Plavasmali is allowed. There is a good heritage of all vineyards that is very important, even because in the case there is naturally less yield, which is already low. So indeed, lower yield makes more quality, and also usually with older plants a bit less alcohol, but in general they are all about 15 anyway. In Postup the slope is lower, up to 45-50% in the upper part, while the lower part closer to the sea is much more smoother, with more topsoil, terra rossa, red. So a bit difference there. You said inclination, so less exposed, and the chemical composition somehow is a bit different, so making a bit more powerful the Dingač. Also, Postup is usually harvested a bit later. The less insulation is letting it ripe a bit later. So overall, it's more gentle, a bit more elegant than Dingač, which is more powerful. Even the notes tend to be a bit different. Postup more approachable, younger. Dingač usually is not easy in the first few years, but we will see both relatively young vintages because nowadays there is not much older. Majority are 3, 4, 5 years old. So we have Postup from Cibilić, 21 vintage, 15.5 alcohol. Dingač from Antičević, 22 vintage. Unfortunately, I couldn't find horizontal. 15 alcohol, so slightly less. You would have expected maybe the opposite, but that's it. I pour them, they are open already a while, but I wanted to breathe more. I will do also next day tasting because I think they may show more tomorrow, but short one because they are still very young, so they will not change that much. You can maybe already see how the color is deep. Crni means black in Croatian. That is how they call the red wine. They call it black, mostly because of Plavac was the, and also Teran in Istra, or actually is similar. As you have seen from the images, is almost heroic farming, especially in Dingač, more than Postup, but even the upper part of Postup. The slopes are incredible, very tough to work, all manual. They built also some cement ramps for the trucks to move around. So it's very complicated. It's really a special place. Then you may appreciate more or less the style. That is another story, but is what is behind the bottle. I always talk about that. It's very important. So let's start from Postup. As I said, it's more gentle. The grape is tannic, but gentler doesn't mean that the tannin is smooth, of course. We will see. So Cibilić is a micro, like majority of the wineries. They make only a few thousand bottles total, between 3 or 4 wines. In Postup, they select the best grapes from the oldest vines. Of course, they have different plots because they have upper and lower part. So they select only the best to make Postup. This is already relevant because they could make with all of them. Instead, they decide to put in the Plavac Mali regular, the part that is less interesting, let's say. All the old vines are 50 years or so. So that is another key point. The alcohol is very high. Postup usually is slightly lower. They harvest slightly earlier, they told me, to keep a bit more acidity and a bit less sugar. And they do very short maceration, just about a week fermentation maceration. So it's very short because usually 10-15 days is the standard. Below 10 is rare, but for this kind of grape makes sense. And then they make only a couple of thousand bottles of this wine, and they may do 2 years of French barrique aging, 40% new. So very specific, very peculiar, we can say, very maniacal care of everything, as you understand. So it's ruby, very deep. This can age many years, but as I said, Postup is a bit more approachable, younger. So of course, this should be much more approachable, being also 1 year older than the Dingač. Starting with the dark fruit, classic of Plavac, plum, first of all. There is some ethereal immediately, mineral. Old vines, of course, dig deep into the soil. There's some ripe dark fruit, little spicy so far. 40% new oak is no leader. French also is given usually, so it's a bit surprised so far, not marking much. So far, elegant and good complexity, I can say. Is considered one of the very best in the area. Can compete, usually Dingač get a bit more ratings. This one compete with the best Dingač usually. It is bottled almost a couple of years, so it's already quite interesting to get it. Well, of course, would be better a bit older, but that's it. The quantities are too little to last long. Now some more spices, some chocolate is coming out, so the oak notes. I doubt we will have much tertiary. They are very refined, very refined. It's a trademark of Postup to be more refined. Dingač usually is more powerful, but this one in particular. The attention to every detail makes a difference. The tannin is still remarkable. It's very bone dry. Here there is no residual sugar, 100%. That is another reason probably of the alcohol level. We'll talk later. good depth, mineral, a touch of spice, the fruit first of all, perfect with any important meat. So very pleasant, very pleasant. Even more gentle now the nose, with more spices but very delicate. The fruit now is less evident. A sweet note also now. So refined and good complexity so far. Yeah, bone dry really. The tannin is still evident but quite gentle. Cannot say soft, cannot say silky, but quite gentle. So it's already integrated and is cleaning really well the palate and leaving you very pleasant, great depth. So very nice, very nice. So Dingač Antičević. As you can see, we visited, there is a proper cellar. He is a bit bigger. I don't know exactly the number of bottles, but he's making several wines, so I guess 15,000 bottles or even more. So it's not that micro. Still with a small cellar, so a bit of troubles in handling everything. He's doing everything on spot, even bottling, everything by himself. So the barrique room is very small. He has also long history, the family, especially 100 years ago or so. Then with the wars and then communism, things changed. But they have a good heritage of old wines, especially in Dingač, and quite decent property because he makes two Dingač. This one and one called traditional, so that is really the old school. This is more modern, but still in between compared to the Postup from Cibilić. We will see now. The color is a bit darker also because it's 1 year younger. So also old vines, but not all. He has, basically there is the tunnel, as you can see. When you arrive from the tunnel, you have most of the vineyards down on the left and a small portion on the right, which is closer to Postup. That is where his vineyard is. Very steep also there, and not too low, close to the sea, so it's more upper part, up to 300 meters around the vineyards. He's in upper part, very steep, it's an incredible place, but something replanted, so the age is in between, up to 50, but some can be 15, 30, things like that. So more mature fruit, more traditional in a way because he's using barriques, but 1 year and a half or two of Slavonian cask and a couple of weeks of maceration, so longer than Cibilić. So this is not traditional 100%, but a bit more on the classic style, let's say. In fact, the nose is completely different. Here you have a lot of different things. There is more impact. Besides the dark fruit, here you have more plants, rhubarb also a hint, or another root similar, I forgot. The spiciness is not that much. I don't know in his case how much new oak, but little, I guess. Yeah, it's much more. A lot of this fruit and plants more than herbs. A bit of spicy, mineral, but not that evident. Also here a sweet note, and also some green, so some herbal starting. Even if it's half alcohol less, it's a bit richer also on the palate. Here there might be a touch of residual sugar. One reason he may have, because many in Dingač leave a bit. I think 1-2 grams can be, the other is more bone dry. So that is making it a bit rounder, but the tannin is, of course, is also younger, 1 year less, besides that the character is a bit stronger usually in Dingač, but 1 year less helps also to have a bit more tannic, but still already quite well integrated. You can sip it. Of course, need food also this one, perfect with those dishes, but you can sip a bit even itself. The other is a bit more approachable, but also this one can. Good length, yeah, less mineral than the Postup. That is a sign of the older vines, indeed. Now it's turning a bit more on these plants, herbs. Quite a classic, these kind of notes, especially when they are not that old. Also Mediterranean herbs, olives can be old characters that come out all the time, but this is still young. A bit more spicy, even here a touch of chocolate now. So it's less refined, but more complex so far. Yeah, more tannic, typical tannin of Dingač, still dry, with a touch of sweet fruit in the end. Here less the plants, herbs, so there is no any bittery. Freshness is also good acidity for both at the end, so keep you salivating together with the tannin. Yeah, the touch of sugar, I think that is, helps to smoothen a bit, is already approachable. Of course, this is more in drinking window than this one, so the Postup already a bit. This one just starting, drinking window. The aging potential is big for both, of course, but for the Dingač more. And also very pleasant palate with the notes that it leaves. Here we are, more than a day after. As hinted, they are still relatively young, so the change was not much, but I still wanted to give it a try for the conclusions. So they smoothen a bit both, in particular the Dingač, because the Postup is already a bit more gentle and more elegant. Prices, I didn't mention before, retail, not in the winery, retail in Croatia, both about 25-30, depending where. In the cellar, a bit less. Yet, besides the smoothening, a bit more spiciness here now also more. So more spices, more chocolate, and a touch of herbal, but tertiary notes, no. That is still too early. Just 3-4 years is not enough. And also here now something like those plants I was mentioning yesterday for the Dingač. So a bit more similarities in the spectrum. So a bit more complexity, but not that much. Also on the palate they are a bit smoother, that is normal after opening, but still the tannic, but good, the acidity is very nice, and it's nice the length and leaving that sweet fruit with a touch of spicy and other things. So very nice, very elegant first of all, but very nice overall. They do a great job. I'm quite impressed with their wine. Here also a bit of turn, still mostly on these plants and a hint of herbs, but even here not tertiary at all. This is even younger, and little spice, because for sure there is more oakiness here than there. This is too young anyway to show much more, but also a bit gentler. Nice also here the length. Of course it's a bit more drying up with the tannin, even if there is that touch of the sugar. Also here you have that sweet fruit on the back and a bit of this, let's say, bittery of the plants, herbs. So no big evolution, but a bit more. They have both great aging potential, great wines. Of course this is a bit more refined. This is a bit more austere in a sense, even in the characteristics, besides being a bit more powerful and tannic. So a great showcase of the area with two tiny boutique wineries. I hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe, comment please. Help us to grow, and salute.